outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, CEO of the Crone Law Firm. And today, my guest is Michael Synk, who is a business consultant here in Memphis. He's done a lot of good work for a lot of businesses, not just in Memphis, but across the region and across the country. And one of those businesses that he's helped significantly is the Crone Law Firm. He's done a lot of good work for us, and we've appreciated his guidance, particularly, in this COVID era. And so I wanted to have him on. We're going to learn a little bit about Michael and kind of his background, how he got to where he is now, and then maybe he'll share with us some tips on what businesses need to be doing in the moment, as well as thinking about the future. Michael, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm going to correct something that you just said.
Okay.
You said, I certainly worked hard for you, but in working with me, my clients end up working hard very well because they're the ones who have to implement. So it's not just me coming in and working hard. I certainly put you and your team through the paces.
Well,
you guys worked out and came out with really great outcomes.
That's true. And one thing that I said to you, and I think you've used it, is I've always been somewhat cynical about consultants and coaches because they tend to come in and have you sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya, and it's all really great while you're doing it, but then it breaks up and you go back to what you were doing before. And I can certainly attest that Michael does hold people accountable. I understand what you're saying, but you still have to have a good guide who's got a good format and system, and you certainly do, and I appreciate your help.
Good. I like the word guide. That's kind of, I feel like I guide people through new complexities they're facing.
Sure.
And that's, in the simplest way of saying what I do as a business coach.
Now, you and I have known each other for some time, and I know that you're not a native Memphian. Is that right?
No. As you can see behind me here, there's some piece of AstroTurf from Michigan Stadium from the Bo Schembechler era. So I grew up in the Detroit area and went to school in Ann Arbor when Bo Schembechler was beating the snot out of Ohio State every year. And so I have fond memories of that time. My wife gave me that. That's actual certified AstroTurf from the stadium when Schembechler played. So that tells you where I'm coming from. I'm a Midwest boy. So
very good. So what kind of education did you pursue at Michigan?
So I got the degree they let me get, is what I would say, as many college students at that time. I went to college thinking I might become a social worker, and ended up learning that I have an affinity for teaching and instructing and coaching, and I ended up getting a degree in education, a history major and social studies minor, and I ended up coming out of college and teaching high school for 2 years. And I still look fondly on those days. And I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that I'm still kind of doing that. And maybe the high school students were sometimes, I'm joking here, Alan, a little more mature than my clients, but not really. There's big similarities between entrepreneurs and high school kids in things. And I mean that in an affectionate way. But that I taught high school in inner city Detroit for 2 years. So.
And how did you get from inner city Detroit teaching to guiding businesses to success?
Yeah, it wasn't a obvious path. You know, I was a little frustrated with teaching, mainly because it looked like it was not going to go anywhere at that time. And so my brother got me an interview with his company, which was Kelly Services, the Kelly Girl People, temporary help. And I got one of those favor to my brother interviews that ended up going 3 hours, and they hired me. And then I started I want to say a 12-year career with Kelly Services. And being young and single for most of that time, it was kind of like the Army. Join the Army, see the world. So I moved around from Detroit, and then as a sales rep, they moved me to Kalamazoo, Albany, New York. I met my wife there. We moved back to headquarters in Detroit, and then Pittsburgh, and then the greater Boston area. So I just kind of moved a lot, and then we finally came back to Memphis because we had a 2-year-old at the time, and the grandparents relocated to Memphis, back to Memphis where Meg grew up, and we were like, we don't have any relatives in Boston. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to be grandparents? So I moved back to Memphis and won the hearts of my in-laws. Besides my wife, I had hers already, but the in-laws now were forever indebted to me for bringing their daughter home. So
yeah, sometimes that's a heavy lift, getting the in-laws.
Yeah, it is. But I brought the daughter home, and then Peter, and then 2 more came along after that. And then, I continued to work in the temp industry here, and then in a healthcare company for a while. And this is kind of the last step of the journey. The company I was with hired a gentleman named Vern Harnish, that many people know that name. He wrote a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and he's an expert at strategy. And he was our coach. This was before he became famous. And he was the external coach, and I became the internal coach, and making sure what he did when he left got done, and realized, boy, this is bringing me back to the teaching and coaching that I did before, and I really like this. And one of our offices had me come in and do some consulting with them, and then said, would you consult our customers? We'll pay extra. And I said, maybe this is what I should be doing all the time. And at that time, I wrote a book called How to Create Customers as Loyal as Norm Peterson. Norm from Cheers.
Right.
Why does he come back? And that kind of got me into the coaching world. And from there, I proceeded to today. I've been a coach for 20 years, 17 with an organization called Gravitas Impact, where a lot of my knowledge and tools and learning for me to be a better coach has come from. It's a coach's organization. It's not a company. I'm not a member of the company, but I am part of their community. And I've been doing this for 20 years. So that's kind of where I am today.
Well, it's always amazing to me, the arc of folks' careers. Very, very seldom is it a straight line.
No, the straight lines don't exist.
It usually is very, very crooked and curvy, goes around corners, but it sounds like you ended up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love what I do. It has its challenges, but the challenges are fun. And ultimately, the thing that I think I really do better than other coaches, or what makes me valuable, is I work with someone like you who's pretty smart and passionate about what they do, but is facing something new and different. Some complexity has changed. And what I do really is help them use tools and stuff and a methodology, but help them think through that complexity so that it's easier to understand, and then they know what to do. And then continue to, as complexity continues to grow, because it will, how do you simply understand and get people aligned around that? So I love doing that. My brain is made to sort things out. Can't help myself.
Well, let me ask you this. Spending a lot of time in the North Midwest and the Northeast, coming to Memphis, what was the biggest adjustment, other than the weather, that you had to make between those places and Memphis, Tennessee?
Yeah, well, the glasses fogging up, going outside and inside during the summer was like, wow. I'm finally kind of used to that. But one thing in Memphis that is interesting that I find is that literally, this thing of 6 degrees of separation, you've heard Kevin Bacon. I think in Memphis it's 2. Everybody really does know, people can figure out who I am by calling one person. And, it's not like they got this person to this person to this person. It's 1 or 2 phone calls. So everyone knows everybody, and that is really good. And it's also a challenge. I did have to, as you know, Alan, I can be fairly straightforward about what I say. And that early on, that was a real challenge, because this is a good thing for a coach to have, but in other parts of Southern living, saying what's on your mind may not work very well. So, for example, I remember, I look on this fondly these days, but when I first came to Memphis, people would say, let's go out and have drinks. And I would go, okay, when? And they go, oh, he thinks I really invited him for drinks. And I had to learn there's a couple more steps there, and Midwesterners kind of are, hey, if you're invited over for drinks, it usually means that afternoon.
Right.
And you say for dinner and you don't show up, they're apt to call you and say, why didn't you come? I invited you for dinner. And that's just, I've had to learn those little nuances, and I still screw those up from time to time. But that directness works for coaching when I'm actually engaged working with you. And you can go back to us working, you kind of said no kumbaya with me. It's like, no, let's get right to the point. Let's get working. That doesn't look right. I don't know if I'm answering my question about adjusting to Memphis or digging myself a deeper hole. So
No. Well, let me follow it up with this question. When I was at the University of Memphis, then it was Memphis State, I took a Tennessee history class from a fellow named Charles Crawford, who at the time was the state historian, and he was, just very well steeped in history of Tennessee, but particularly Memphis. And he was wont to say that Memphis, more than any other southern city, was welcoming to people from outside who had who had it on the ball. It was a metocracy as opposed to an oligarchy, like a lot of southern cities, where if you grew up in the town, you could have access to opportunity, but if you were from the outside, you were kind of shut out. Have you found that to be the case in Memphis?
I think that's fairly accurate. If sometimes the opportunity to show that you're on the ball, you might have to go through a couple steps. But when you show that you're on the ball, everything's equal, everything's even. I definitely agree with that about Memphis. And I've heard that, say, Birmingham, Alabama isn't that way. In comparison, I haven't really been there, but that's the thing is if you show you're bright, you care, you're on the ball, you're just not gabbing away to hear your voice, people treat you as equals and welcome you right in. Sometimes it's hard to catch attention on that, but that happens in Michigan, So it's not I would agree with you.
Well, and he would go on to say that at the time, and this may be an inopportune time to talk about statues in general, but he said, there's not a single statue, this is circa 1985, in Memphis dedicated to a native Memphian. Now, since that time, I should add that Dr. Harrington, there's a statue of Dr. Harrington, who's a native Memphian, near Lemoyne Owen. But at that time, when you think of the people who really shaped Memphis, Elvis Presley, W.C. Handy, Boss Crump, all of those folks came from came from outside the city.
It says there's a statue of Overton, Mayor Overton. Was he from Memphis originally? Like at Overton Park, isn't there a statue of him there?
No, that's actually Ed Crump.
That's okay. Okay,
Yeah.
He was from someone else.
Yeah, he was from Mississippi, I think, originally.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's an interesting take on Memphis, and I think that's true, particularly in your line where a business person is going to hire you and not really think too much about, well, I didn't go to high school with this guy, so I don't know if I really want to hire him. And I think in a lot of places that's a consideration.
Yeah. It's. I kind of know that in other cities, I have all the wrong sides of those questions. I went to high school somewhere out in another city. I went to a northern university. I probably don't go to the right politically correct church. Things like that. But that doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. All right. Well, one last question, personal question, then we'll move on to some other things. But is there a pivotal person in your life that really that affected the trajectory of your life? That if you look back, without that person, you wouldn't be sitting where you are sitting today. So who would that person be?
That's a good question. There's obvious answers. My mother, my father died when I was 16. My mother did a great job of finishing the job of raising us. But beyond family, I think there's two people in particular. The guy I worked for early on at Kelly, his name was Barry Marshall. And I was several levels below him. He was like the regional vice president and I was a sales rep. But he and I worked together well, and he was a good mentor and let me have some freedom in what I was doing, and gave great business sales guidance about planning and helping people buy rather than selling. That was one. And I have to say Bert Harnish, although I wouldn't say he's a mentor, I've learned a lot from him. And it opened my eyes to the fact that I think strategically. And I've always thought strategically, and that's how I've succeeded in the business world. But I didn't know that that's how my brain worked. Other people, most people that I deal with are thinking tactically. And that's a gift. But I learned that from having him be a coach at my firm and learning from him and proceeding to coach. I think I owe him a lot because of that. I would not say he's a mentor, but this idea of thinking big and bringing back to today and what is the rock you have to move, I have to say that directly comes from him.
All right, well, that's a good segue, because I really do love the way that you illustrate that strategic thinking versus tactical thinking. Talk a little bit about, without giving the farm away, talk a little bit about your rock and sand analogy and how that fits into strategic business thinking.
Yeah. Rock and sand is an interesting story. I actually was having trouble explaining Vern's strategic planning model to some people, and I finally got some people to sit down with me and tell me how to explain it. And we came up with this conflict that business owners have between pushing sand and moving rocks. And we kind of start, so what's sand? Because they were saying, I always feel like I'm pushing sand, but when you work with me, I'm figuring out the rocks. And so, you know, that developed into kind of a terminology and a methodology and eventually a book called Rock and Sand, and it's the model I follow. It's not anything super brilliant except that it captures your imagination more than anything. I'm pulling from other experts on strategy to put this together. But like your business, you were, and most of my clients, when I start with them, they're good at pushing the sand. They're doing all the right things to transact business, collect the money, satisfy their customers, and that should always be like the number one priority, because if you don't do that well, you don't have any money, right?
That's right.
So I'm with them, but what happens is that becomes strategy. Just do more, faster, jump higher. And that's really not strategy. Strategy is, what are the things you need to do to be able to push more sand with the same amount of people, hopefully, or not just multiply the people and that's how you get it. Do we open a new office? Do we put a new technology in there? Do we figure out a new line? Are we selling appropriately the way people buy? All of these things are rocks. So companies and organizations, not just companies, but nonprofits as well, naturally and should be worried about the sand every day. And that always comes up first. If you got a question, an idea, do I need to push the sand or move a rock? Well, a customer coming with an order, you better push the sand, right? But so the rocks slip away. So my strategic planning process, there's a picture of it up here behind me, is how to figure out what the rocks are so that you move them to, and keep moving the sand, keep pushing the sand, because if you don't, you'll run out of money. But you got to get a rock figured out that everyone can work on, that improves your ability, and in your case, improves your ability to bring in more clients and move them through the legal process more effectively than you already are, rather than just hire 10 more lawyers and do it. What are the rocks that are going to move? Projects, initiatives, whatever. And that's what we did with you, is figured there's a couple rocks right now that we can work on. And you know, this fall when we get back together, that's going to be, what's the next set of rocks to keep this moving forward? That's kind of the I like to say that is a good explanation of the tension that exists in every entrepreneur's or business owner's mind every day when they wake up. Am I moving rocks today or pushing sand? Well, I got to push the sand, but damn, the rocks are going to run away. How do I get back to that? And that's where a coach and a strategic plan and the things I help companies with is, let's make sure these rocks stay front and center, and they're based on good foundations that will get you where you want to be 3 years from now or 10 years from now.
Sure. What do you think the role of the coach or the guide is? I love your use of the word guide there, because I think it's really very descriptive of what you do. What's the role of the guide, your role, between those planning meetings?
Between the meetings, so I tend to work with people on a quarterly basis and get the team together, reassess the plan, how well we're doing, fix those things that didn't go well, and then decide on the next things, and then how we're going to do them. Not me, how you are. And after that, I guess I say I'm on retainer, but as a guide, I'm going to check in and call you up and say, so how's that going? Because we can't wait till the end of the quarter to decide whether moving a rock is working or not. We need to decide a month in and change what we're doing, because you said this rock was really important. Failure to move the rock is not an option. So it's like, that's what I want to hold you or my clients accountable, the CEO and the leadership team. Are you working on moving the rocks? If it's not moving, we got to figure out why. And the obstacles come in at that point. Something got in the way, a whole bunch of new business happened, someone got sick. You know, there's things that get in the way, and you've got to sort those things out, because you said the rock is important. And that's the thing that's going to grow your business. You can't let that get away from you. So that's between it. And then while I'm talking to you between those quarterly sessions, it's like, okay, what's the next thing that's out of whack or come to the fore that you're struggling with? Or what's the next complex thing that we want to tear apart and figure out more rocks on? And those things can be in the area of leadership or talent or profitability analysis or systems, customer understanding, things like that. So does that kind of?
That's great. Can you share a story? Can you share a story of when the process went really, really well, and then I'm going to ask you for a story when it didn't go so well?
Well, I have a client here in Memphis that when I'm going to not name names to protect the innocent.
Sure.
But they had a good business, they were making money, but they were stalled. And at some point, I'll say the first name, Brad and I kind of got together, and he realized, I can't keep being stalled, and the strategic plan you're talking about is something I need to do. So I got working with him, and I worked with him for about 3 years. And that $4 million company is now a $35 million company with offices in Europe. And they continue to follow the processes I taught them. They don't need me anymore. And that to me, it's like, that's the big graduation story. It's like, I would love to work with people forever, but at some point I got to realize they've succeeded. They've got this down. Call me when you've got the next complexity that you can't figure out, and then we'll get back together and get going. Frustrating story. I was working with a client also here in Memphis, and again, I'm going to not mention names to protect the innocent, but we worked, I worked within one division of a company, and we got into it, we realized we weren't, there was only a short runway to turn this sucker around. It was not necessarily a strategic opportunity as much as a turnaround. But we dug in and we got them working right, and we really turned this company around to a certain point, and it looked like this division was going to start beating the other division in terms of performance and profitability of the company. And there was jealousy between the two divisions, and the arrow pointing or shooting or whatever back and forth. And I wasn't working directly with the CEO. I was working with the president of that division. And it got caught up in politics that I couldn't get around. And, the guy's authority got undercut. And that business just, and that was very difficult to watch. And I think that I probably could have done more with the CEO and the other. Maybe I ignored some things there because we were doing so well within this little thing, but the dynamics between the whole company, they needed guidance there. But the competition was really extremely difficult. It was a case of not a lot of alignment.
Right.
I don't want to, that's a hard question you asked where things went awry, because we didn't fail there. But when I left and then they fired the president, it went right down. And this is a long-term Memphis company, and that no one really knows about, and it continues not to go well. And that's hard.
It shows you that that businesses are made of people at the end of the day, and you still have to deal with the personal aspect of getting along.
Yeah, and that was something I was not able to overcome. They did not hire me for that. They hired me, the president of the division hired me to help him. So I didn't have responsibility for the others, but somehow we needed to go there and get people working together, and it just never happened. And that was hard. That was very hard to watch. And I in some ways, I feel responsible that I couldn't have done more. And, you know, I have a Catholic background. I like to beat myself on the back and say mea culpa, you know.
I know you've worked with a lot of different businesses that have experienced a lot of growth. What is there a single step or a single place where it's kind of make or break, that's kind of the hardest thing to hump to get over? You know, I don't know, going from $500,000 to $1 million, or going from $1 million to 5. Is there some hurdle that once that entrepreneur or that company gets over the hurdle, then growth and innovation are easier?
You would think that's true. It's more a case, there's like 5 or 6 hurdles. Okay, there's studies that have been done, and if anyone on this call wants to reach out to me, I have kind of a chart of the stages of growth that another company researchers have figured out. And what's interesting about it, it's not how much money, it's how many people. So 0 to 10, you know, all companies basically have the same set of problems, but the way you deal with them is different based on complexity. And complexity is related to how many numbers you have of people, not to the revenue. So 0 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, and then over 100. Those are the hurdles, and there's a specific set of challenges that you face at each set of the way. And now my memory about all those challenges is escaping me, because there's a lot there. Every one of those companies is dealing with the same thing, but the way you get it done in a CEO's role changes dramatically. From, you know, 1 to 10, the CEO is driving everything. You know, you have 100 employees, the CEO isn't driving everything. So I hope that it's a good question that you asked. I hadn't thought about that, but it's very much related to, I can give this chart to somebody and say, so how many employees you got? Okay, so you're right here. Are these the problems you're facing? And they go, oh yeah, how did you know that? And so stages of growth. If someone wants to talk to me about stages of growth, just find me on the internet or call me. It's very helpful to know where you are.
That's it. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I you know, as an employment lawyer, I can understand that, because the complexity of the interpersonal relationships causes different issues and everything else.
If you a good way to think of this is, when there's one employee in the company, you have conversations with yourself. And there's 2, then there's conversations going this way. And then there's 3, all of a sudden there's 6 directions of communication. And then there's 4, it just multiplies and multiplies. And there's nothing you can do about that except change. And that's where people get stuck. The hurdle comes with right around 10 and then at 25. So.
Well, we're sitting here in an interesting time. As we tape this episode, we're still kind of quasi quarantined. People are wearing masks. Certain industries are doing well. Certain industries are not doing well. In this environment, what's your advice to businesses on what they should be doing today in the short term, and how should they be looking at the future?
There's definitely some advice that I have that a business owner should kind of take stock of to map out the next 6 months. I can't say directly what each company should do. Every company should do different. But one area is everyone should look at the inherent strengths of the company. What are they really good at? And is there something else they can quickly become good at that someone wants? So going through that and doing a SWOT analysis, the strengths part, you're really good at this. Can I get good at something else really fast that other people want? So you've seen this in obvious ways with the Old Dominic's is making hand sanitizer. They could quickly shift to that because they have, the chemistry knowledge and they have equipment, and that's a quick shift, and that provided cash flow. So there are those things, looking at what your strengths are, because you probably got to do some shifting, and it's got to come from points of strength. The second thing is to take stock of the market that you are in. And we went through this with you. We kind of drew a market map, and we kind of said, think of the market you're in as the FedEx Forum. It's a big arena, and you're in there, and the customers are in the arena, and who else is playing with you in the arena? There's competitors who are trying to get to your customers. You're trying to get to the customers. There are companies that are channels to your customers. There are potential partners who are already selling to your customers, but for different reasons. There are vendors that ultimately are selling what they have through you to your customers. And kind of draw that out to see who's at play and how you can be different from the other competitors. Where are your places to be different? Because strategy is about being different from your competitors and evolving that idea. So drawing out that map, you will get to some conclusions and you'll figure out holes. And then we did an attribute map, and we saw for you there are certain areas where you can be really different than other law firms. The other thing that our coaches, especially from Australia, have learned, they're further on ahead than us on recovering from COVID. They're way down the pike on it. What they've noticed, or what they've really learned, is pay attention to map out what the customer's experience is doing business with you. Because whether we like it or not, people's decision-making processes have changed. COVID has made people think differently about what is of value. And people are really value-oriented more. And this experience has got to be good, because whether you like it or not, they're shopping. So I've been working actually at my church, St. Mary's Episcopal. I'm on the vestry there, and I think this is a really good example, is they haven't been able to go to church yet. So they're doing online services. And it's like, guys, that's what we really got to work on, those online services to be really good, because if they're not good, even though they're loyal to us, the YouTube service that's online right after you is another church. They're looking whether they think they're looking or not. So your customers, you can't afford to lose them. You've got to work on the experience of doing business with you to keep them and get them to tell others. That's where I would say, figure out the strengths, do this customer map, and truly understand that. And then what's the customer experience and why are they buying? Because it's probably changed. People are engaging me for different reasons now than they were 6 months ago.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I think we're all trying to figure all of that out, and I think the businesses that are saying to themselves, "Well, I'm gonna wait and see what happens, and when this is over, then I'm gonna go back to doing what I was doing." And I think the bad assumption there is that this is never going to be over. There's never going to be a time when somebody walks to a microphone and says, "This is over."
No, it may
be change. There may be a treatment. There may be a vaccine. There may or may not.
It's going to be.
We're not going to go back to January 2020 and pick up the services we were providing in January 2020. That's all going to be gone.
People are going to be getting those services differently. Their value equations have changed. Everything's going to change. We're not going back. We're going somewhere else, and it's going to be different. And that is why one of the things I'm offering to people right now is what I call a quick pivot planning session, not a full strategic planning session. Just let's go get together, reinforce what our strengths are, who our core customer really is and how they're buying and how that's changed, and what pivots can we make to get more or save more or keep more for the next 6 months, and then come back. So that's something, on my website, there's kind of a thing, or if you contact Alan, I can give him kind of a one sheet that he can forward to you, or I don't know how you want to handle that, but that's something that's worth doing. And in fact, working with you, we weren't calling it that, but we were starting with a big strategic plan. COVID, we got to pivot. We got a good foundation figured out. Now, how are we changing things from what we thought? Because the plan you're doing now is not exactly what we thought when I first started working with you.
That's right. And you've been very helpful to us, and I know you've been helpful to a lot of people. And we'll put something up on the screen. If you don't mind, I'll put your email address up on the screen when this runs, so you can. There should be an email address down here. Take a look at that, and if you'd like to contact Michael, just zip him an email, and I'm sure he'd love to talk with you. Michael, we're about out of time. I really appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate you coming on the show, and all the help you've given us and other small businesses. And I'm so glad that your wife's family lived in Memphis and not in Nashville or Birmingham or someplace else, because Memphis is a better place because you're here in a lot of ways. You're real involved in the community and your church, and that wouldn't have happened without that accident of where your wife lives. So a lot of people come to Memphis because their wife's family's from Memphis. That's for sure.
I brought their flower home, and I've learned to love it, and I love it. And I really, people saying, "You're going to leave?" And I'm like, "No, why would I leave? I'm here. This is what I know now. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. So why would I want to leave?" So.
Well, that's a great last word. I appreciate everybody watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with one person that you think might enjoy it. If you got it from an email, forward the email. If you saw it on social media, please share it. Like us on Facebook and YouTube. And until the next time, this is Alan Crone, and I'm going to go out and get a little justice. Thank you.